I want to talk some Wizards. And this was, we were joking, trying to decide what to talk about today when we were texting, I guess, yesterday, the day before. And we were both thinking Wizards. So that's a problem because groupthink is a terrible disease. But it feels necessary. And I want to couch this first in like, they got the worst defense in the league. They're 29th in net rating. Like this team is bad, but that's one, kind of the point, and two, the expectation given like where they are post Bradley Beal and finally turning into like a functional rebuild. So I want to start with the biggest difference maker on the team, which is Jordan Poole, Defensive Player of the Year candidate, who is hilariously averaging 4 stocks per game, which is like 3rd in the league. That's insane. No, we're not going to talk about Jordan Poole. That's the last I'm going to mention him, probably.
Well, I mean, Jordan Poole he's been
better.
Turned a little bit of a corner at the end of last year, and it feels like most of that is just persisting.
Right. Yeah. No, he's been better. It would be difficult to be worse than he was for most of last year. But this is about the 3 rookies that are playing a ton and their second-year player. That like this core, I don't know. I've heard core 4 on the broadcast the other day, so I'm gonna just go with it. But it's Bilal. So he's the most known of these 4 commodities, obviously, because he's got a year of experience. And he's the guy that we've kind of been in the bag for, really since he was barely into his rookie year, just because of the potential, the size, the sort of black box. Like I don't know what's in there. What are we gonna get? He's just. He's coming off now as we're recording this, his worst game of the year. He was 3-11 against the Warriors, still averaging almost 18 points a game, almost 6 boards, 2.5 assists, making 55% of his shots, 44% from deep, 80% of his free throws. That's a 67% true shooting percentage, which for him, for anybody, that's phenomenal. For a guy that you're like, oh, I don't know about the offense, like that's ridiculous at that level, at that volume. Despite that, he's still, to me, tell me what you think about this, a guy that like has so much room to expand what he's doing offensively, because his usage rate is like just under 18%. So he's just like not taking up a lot of possessions. It just the athleticism, the size, the flashes of like, oh my God, he can handle the ball in the pick and roll. He's become a better cutter. His spot up has improved dramatically. Like there's just so much unexplored territory with him. And that's really, I think that's where you start when you talk about the Wizards. There's these other guys we'll get into, but like, would you still view him as like, this is like the guy, if there is one at this early juncture for the Wizards?
I think I would. And part of that too is, and I don't think you mentioned this, is so you mentioned all just the offense that they've tapped into and maybe not tapped into just yet. And it's also, okay, now you go guard the best player on the other team. And
right. The defense is the given. I think that's well understood about him already.
It just the floor navigation on defense and the ability to just, he's someone who looks a little bit stronger, needs to continue to get stronger, but oh no, you go defend like smaller point of attack guards or just go guard these bigger power wings, and he's going to do it. And it's just, I know the Wizards defense isn't good. I think, what is it, 30th still in points allowed per possession? Yeah. I don't care, because when you watch him, it's, okay, am I going to predict defensive player of the year? No, but is this someone who can kind of be the infrastructure of your perimeter defense? I would say yes.
Yeah, and these can be noisy, but to that point, if you just break it down by time spent defending, his most common matchups this year in order are Trae Young, Jason Tatum, Jimmy Butler, Donovan Mitchell, and Steph Curry. Those are the top 5 guys. So these are tiny samples, right? But when you said like him against smaller guards, so far to me, that is where he is like an A+ difference maker. So Trae Young is 2 for 15 on the season when Coulibaly is designated as his primary defender. Steph is 1 of 7. Like his length and mobility against smaller guards is just death. So like if you're thinking of the theory of the Wizards longer term, you've got the guy that you can just throw at the primary creator. Like if it's a wing, sure, but if it's a smaller guard, I think he can just erase that guy, is what it's starting to look like. Now he's a second-year player, he's young, he's inconsistent, but the outlines of like, okay, this is how our defense will potentially be built. We got Alex Sarr behind him. We'll talk about him. It's looking like at least a very good shot blocker. Coulibaly can just be the guy that takes your best offensive player out of the game. And like, I don't know, that's a pretty powerful asset to have if you're trying to like put together a team, and just imagine what all these, sub 21-year-olds are going to look like down the line.
I think most people would still default to that the guy has yet to be drafted, and that might be true given what this draft class is projected to look like. But to be here, and kind of like the overarching question we'll get to is whether the Washington Wizards are ahead of schedule. But to be here and like Coulibaly that's a real answer right now. And I actually don't think, maybe you and I haven't fully appreciated it, but I think writ large, this isn't fully appreciated in general. When you're talking to just anyone who follows the entire league, the Wizards are kind of still waiting on finding that person. And you had to really read into, I don't know that either of us, we would have said, okay, sure, he's their best chance at having that guy last year. I think now he might have reached the point you can actively just predict that there's a not insignificant chance that their best player of the future isn't someone they've yet to draft or that they've yet to acquire. Like, it might just be him.
And I think at the very, very least, if you have watched him at all, you've got to say that guy's going to be a phenomenal role player on a really good team.
Yeah.
Like, that feels like, and that's immensely valuable too, right? Like, that having that kind of floor, forget the ceiling, which we both think is super high. That's so when you do get the guy, if you're of the mind that he's not there yet, Coulibaly just fits perfectly next to like whatever superstar guy you have not yet drafted or traded for or whatever. There's still three other guys, these three rookies they've got this year: Kyshawn George, Alex Sarr, and Bub Carrington. Just first of all, you love like how spread across the positional spectrum all those guys are. It just fits, like none of these guys overlap with each other really at all. And they have such differing skill sets. I mean, we can go in any order. I think George is probably the least known and has so far been the least productive, probably.
And he really had like him, and I'm like, he's got it. There's more ball skills to him, more physicality to him than I thought. I think the shots will eventually start to fall, and he's another guy that's been competing on defense, where clearly doesn't have the ceiling for them, ceiling that Bilal Coulibaly does on the defensive end. But he's just someone who feels, when you talk about who's going to be a superstar role player, this is someone who feels, and look, we're getting ahead of our skis here because he's fewer than 10 games into his career. But he feels so plug and play and is going to be able to do like jack of all trades, master of none type shit. And that as your fourth or fifth starter at some point. And I don't like saying injuries were a blessing in disguise, but they don't have to, but they've been starting him ever since the Kyle Kuzma groin injury. And I don't know if he's going to give that spot back.
I mean, I had the same thought of like, well, man, I guess you better just trade Kuzma now, because I don't know that you're going to, I mean, like, George has had 1.5 good games, I would say, so far. Like, just statistically, like he had his 20-pointer against the Warriors. That was Washington's last game as we're recording this. Draymond Green talked about him and all the other young guys after the fact and was like, they got our respect because George was just going at him, and like both competitively and like verbally. Not always the best idea, but I mean, for a rookie,
I fave it.
I'm on board. Like, you're the Washington Wizards. You have been a laughingstock for like quite some time. Talk your talk. Like, I think that's a positive. But you said it, like the numbers aren't really there. He's averaging like 8 points, 4 boards, a couple assists. The shooting's been terrible, all in all. But he did, got up 17 threes against the Warriors, made 6 of them. There were 5 in a row that went down. Just the feel is there, the versatility, the positional size you want, just all that stuff is really there for him. It is the like
hair. So I forget about that.
It's a deeper cut, right? We started with a deeper cut, so we should move to. Do you want to talk about Sarr or Carrington? Pick your poison.
Let's talk. I have stronger thoughts about Carrington to this point.
Oh,
so let's go with Sarr.
So Sarr, to me, having watched a lot of tape in the last few days and just kind of marrying that with the pre-draft scouting reports and what we saw. The real lows of the preseason and summer league and stuff. Statistically, I do feel confident that he's just going to block shots. 5.3% block rate. That's 97th percentile among bigs. He's blocked at least 2 shots in every game in his career. That's like, short career, but getting a couple blocks a game is never an accident.
Right.
I think the most interesting thing to me in terms of like, what is this guy going to be, is that Washington is clearly viewing him as a center so far. 86% of
by the way, it didn't seem like they were gonna do.
No, why is Valanciunas on like that? That was the takeaway, was like, oh, I guess they think Sarr's a 4, or they don't, or he's not ready yet. So he may not be ready, but Washington's defense has been a fraction above league average with Sarr at center. So that's like, you're looking for encouraging signs, that's a big one. Small sample, caveats apply, obviously. It seems as if he's going to be a stretch 5. Part of that's because half his shots have been from deep this year, but he's making 20% of them, so not great. But I do think, to just paint a full picture, he's pretty limited as a finisher. And like, I don't love the hands. He doesn't elevate a ton inside. He's very easy to move still. Like, some of that will change as he fills out, but like, it does feel, if I had to guess, he seems like a floor stretching 5 that can block shots and maybe be like a grab and go guy off of rebounds, like that kind of thing. I don't know that he's going to be a pick and roll finisher with any real volume. It's so early, but just like, that's kind of my read on it. And that's all to say, if you're going to he's definitely going to shoot them, but if you're going to make threes and block shots and be like pretty mobile, that's going to work. I think. I don't know that there's anything close to stardom in there, but just looking at how he's moved around the floor, some of the strengths and weaknesses, I think he's a starter down the line. And I think like he could have some real pluses. I don't know how you feel about him, but I think I'm frankly like a little bit more optimistic than I was on draft night.
I think I'm probably still skeptical about what he's going to be offensively.
He's got to make shots. That's a big one.
And if he's not going to do that, then you're going to have to streamline what he's doing even more. And then that becomes of, all right, we have to surround him with as much spacing as possible so we can open up his volume at the rim. He is shooting like 69% inside 3 feet, which I think is fine as a rookie. But I guess I get the concept of him on offense. I just don't know what it's going to turn into. I have been very impressed, aside from block rate and just like overall defense. He's a lot more physical than I thought he was going to be able to be. Like, he's not going to be the best rebounding big, but I thought he's fought on the glass a lot better and fared a lot better against some guys that are just stronger and bigger than him in general right now. And again, that in tandem with my preconception coming in was, they're not going to treat him as a center, and they've given him the latitude to be that. And I think that that's ultimately going to be really good for his development. I'm higher on him than I was coming into the regular season, but he's still such, and not necessarily in the good way. Like, he's an uncomfortable mystery box to me on the offensive end.
I think that's right. And I would say too, like, we got to just, this is more for, I'm not saying you do this, but you got to just get off the idea that he was the number 2 pick. Like, we just have to, like, that just can't be part of the calculus, because that's always going to set him up to be viewed kind of unfairly. Like, he just, that's where he was in this class, and it's defensible. Like, taking him there remains defensible. I think, not far from a no-brainer, but yeah, I think I'd just leave it at, I'm with you. Like, I'm encouraged. I'm not like, I'm sold on Coulibaly. I'm encouraged by Sarr. I'd say, and George for sure. So the last guy, Bub Carrington. I don't know, the primary return in the legendary Denny Avdia trade. Can we refer to him as that now?
I guess. What is that 2029 pick going to become? It's not going to be a future Hall of Famer, probably, like Bub, right?
So 10 points, just under 5 assists, 4 boards. Nothing spectacular shooting split wise. Just under 44%, 35% from deep, making all his free throws, 93% there. With him, it's just the craft, I feel like, which just jumps out if you're watching him, getting to spots, just having great feel, like in traffic. Now the knocks might be like, he's a little too reliant on like basically bad shots or like tough shot, like mid-rangers, these pull-ups, these floaters and stuff. But just like, he's a little bit like George in the like passing the eye test thing, where just as a pick and roll ball handler, you can just see like his ability to manipulate space and opponents. And just like, it just feels like, okay, that guy has an idea. And a lot of that's real, like, it's natural, I think. And you don't teach a lot of that stuff. Like, I remember thinking this about D'Angelo Russell many, many years ago. Like, someone asked me, this is a deep cut. When the Lakers had him and Clarkson the first time, it's like, who do you like better? And I was like, I just think Russell understands what to do, like in a pick and roll. And so I like him better. I don't want to just compare Bub Carrington to Russell, but the same kind of, like, he's not rushed. He can get the guy on his back. He can just make the pocket pass. He can pull up when you're supposed to. Like, it's just kind of there. And I think that's my main takeaway, is that he just looks like a player that has an idea of what he wants to do and can do it, like, already.
Who was the name you invoked at the top of that you compared him to before you went to D'Angelo Russell?
Carrington?
Yeah. Didn't you mention another name?
Well, it was when people were comparing, like, is Jordan Clarkson or D'Angelo Russell the better long-term prospect?
Oh, well, so mine's probably been a little bit spicier. When I watch him, I kind of think, well, like, what if you just added or like stretched out 3 or 4 inches of Chris Paul,
Oh, wow.
and the ability. I mean, you mentioned the stuff about getting defenders on your back hip. I think his vision is. I know he's bigger, so it's not. He's not the expert manipulator that Chris Paul is, but he kind of knows that. He's listed at 6'4", by the way, and I call bullshit. Like, this is someone who
He
feels like
seems
he's 6'5" or 6'6".
he seems bigger, right? Like
Right.
he plays bigger than that.
So that patience, maintaining your dribble in traffic, and just even the shot profile a little bit, where it's not getting to the rim a ton. He'll take some threes, but not a ton. But he's trying to get to that pull up midi. We'll see if the floater. I think he's like 1 of 4, 1 or 5 on floaters will start to fall. But he looks comfortable, and he doesn't also seem like he's seeking it out. It's well, there's space. I'm going to dribble into it and take it. But I look at the composure, the poise of maintaining his dribble, and I can't help but think this is someone who's going to drive like hyper efficient offenses someday. Now, I'm not going to predict that he's following the Chris Paul arc, but I'm just thinking about, so is there a chance that, so we've just named four players who are in their second season or less, 3 rookies and 1 sophomore, and Bilal Coulibaly. If you ask me to give the over under on 2.5 of those guys being long-term starters on a good team, like, I'm just going to smash the over right now. Is this early season Kool-Aid? Is it what? And maybe this, and I don't know if you view Carrington in that vein, of the sense, do you view him as someone who can kind of drive an entire offense in that regard?
I think 3-point shooting will just be the swing skill. I think if he can turn some of those pull-ups, just trade some of the 2s for 3s, some of the 2-point jumpers for 3s. I think then it's like, well, I don't have any notes about him, like, offensively, if he can do that. So less than 10 games into his career, and he's this effective already, and you can just see the like outlines of what this might progress into. I think he could be that guy. I think like Coulibaly, I'm more convinced than ever he's going to be a star. I think Carrington is probably the guy you'd pick second in terms of like what could he, like, how big of an impact could he have if he hits like the top range of his possible outcomes.
And he's at 55% or 54% of his pull-up 2s. And so I've actually kind of had the same thought, where he's shooting fine off the catch from 3, but he's not taking a ton of them. We've seen it from Chris Paul. We're like, okay, Chris Paul had more of that like daring do off the, like, he really wanted to humiliate you. And I don't think Carrington has that type of handle or will ever be in that position. But remember how Chris Paul just kind of methodically dribbling into those pull-up 3s that he would hit, maybe like Rockets era Chris Paul or Clippers era Chris Paul. That seems like something Carrington could do. And I feel like I'm running too far afield with the Chris Paul.
Well, no, I mean, it's early. You can do whatever you want. I would say too, we've focused mainly on offense here, I guess, with the exception of Sarr and some Coulibaly talk. Like, I think another positive. Now the numbers just are what they are. This is the worst defense in the league. We've said it several times. All 4 of these guys compete. They're all like interested in defense. It's not, and that's hard to do on a team that's going to be bad. Is to, and it's early. Maybe that changes, but like, the bad defense is more stemming from like mistakes as opposed to just like malaise or lack of commitment or whatever. Like I do think eventually all 4 of these guys can be plus defenders. They all have good positional size. They all like have some
Bub is a
athleticism,
rebounder too. Like, he's just
range.
in there grabbing boards. Yeah.
All these guys I think have like, you can envision Washington being a good defense, and these guys all having a big, certainly Sarr, that's like what he's hanging his hat on at this point, but like they can be a part of a good defense. I feel pretty confident down the line.
So do we think the Wizards are ahead of schedule? Like, their rebuild started last summer.
Yeah.
So we've had 1 season plus fewer than 10 games into their rebuild. They are still one of the worst teams in the league. They want to be one of the worst teams in the league. And I think there are going to be rougher patches. Rookies might hit a wall when they're not used to playing this much. Bilal Coulibaly is going to go through some tough stretches. We have questions. Even Bilal Coulibaly, who I'm highest on, it's, well, like, what is the level of self-creation that he can actually shoulder down the line?
Yeah.
But where do you view their rebuild relative to where you thought it would be or should be, based on when and even how they started? Because look, that Bradley Beal trade, it was more about just ripping off the Band-Aid. Like, they didn't put anything or any asset in place, unless you were really that high on Jordan Poole, to say, okay, like, this is something that's no, that was more about ripping off the Band-Aid. None of these guys are like the product of that trade. So where do you just kind of like, how do you feel about their rebuild relative to how and when they started?
I think you've got to say it's further along than than expected. Just because all four of those guys we talked about, yeah, sure, it's fair if you want to say, to circle back, well, they don't have the guy yet that's going to be the best player on the next good version of this team. I mean, maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. But like, they've got these four guys who all sort of fit together. And the pick situation, they owe that 25 to the Knicks with top 10 protections, and it's top 8. And then, I mean, like, maybe that probably not going to convey. And then they've got the latter half of the decade. They've got all the Phoenix swaps coming in and all that other stuff. Like, so I think it's possible that because of what they have now, which, like, again, this may change in 2 months when they still have 2 wins or something. And like, it looks rough, but like what they have now, plus their flexibility going forward, their ability to trade veterans for more draft assets. It's like, for this being the first full year of the rebuild, because you can't really call last year that because they were just starting.
Yeah.
I mean, like, or maybe, I don't know, maybe you can, but like, they're further along, I think, than you would expect. And that's because they seem to have kind of hit on all four of these guys more than anything else.
Is it weird that, I guess because it's more about draft position though, and you told us to throw that out the window, it feels like Sarr is still sort of the biggest of like, oh, was that the right pick?
Well, yeah. I mean, the other thing I'd say too is they're different from, like, take Portland, right? Portland has, half the roster is older and they need to trade him, and we're not sure about Scoot.
Hey,
and then,
that's
like,
a top 12 defense you're disparaging right now.
Yeah.
In Portland.
Utah doesn't have the guy. I mean, I don't know where else you want. Detroit, like, yeah, Cade Cunningham's better than anybody Washington has, but I think maybe the thing about the Wizards rebuild that's so appealing is it's so clean. It's just like, they got their picks. They've got these four guys, and you kind of have a shotgun approach. Like, maybe 2 of them become great. It's just, there's no complicating factors, right?
And yeah, no one's rushing them
Yeah.
either. Where I think Utah and Portland, Utah specifically, because they have all those picks and Lowry, it's, if they're not they don't have the guy, they need to go out and trade for the guy. And even with Portland, it's, well, you have all these, we called them stacked. We knew they were going to be bad, but they are kind of stacked. When you look at the roster, it's, they need to hold this fire sale, or they could make a consolidation trade. Washington's not up against that. And it's not, I mean, Portland and Utah been in their rebuilds longer. Portland's feels longer because those like latter Dame years were just aimless. But Utah's like, okay, they're in the 3rd season of the rebuild. And it's like, so Washington's in its 2nd. They're not light years behind. So yeah, I think they're ahead of, for me, I don't think I would have predicted we're sitting here in the onset stages of year 2 and like, man, they might have like 3 or 4 guys who are just going to be part of the next really good team.
Yep. Yeah. No, I mean, really, again, 2 and 4, worst defense in the league. It's like, they're bad. They've been bad. They're going to be bad. And like, that's fine. It's totally okay, because they've got what look like some pretty promising guys in there.